Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Climate Action Summit for Earth Day. My name is Charles Appleby. I'm the founder of No CO2, that's n0co2.org. We plant trees, plant enough trees, and you too can go carbon neutral. So this is the third section of the day. Should be a couple of recordings already on Facebook about us. So in this section, we're just starting off now with Alistair Currie from Population Matters. And so Population Matters was for me an organization that was a little bit in the background. And then suddenly there were Population Matters adverts on the side of buses running around London. And my friend told me that was actually very good value. So I think that really raised your profile. And then when you look at the website, you see that David Attenborough's involved as well. So Alistair, you're working for a very high profile, high impact organization. So thanks for joining us. Just before we get into your material, would you like to just tell us a little bit about, at this very strange time of lockdown, what actually are you yourself doing differently at home?
I would say professionally, it's not making. First of all, say obviously thank you very much for having us here and for hosting this whole event. It's brilliant. Thank you. It's interesting. Population Matters again. I think that the last speaker was saying about how they were sort of ahead of the curve on Zoom and those kinds of things. We're actually a virtual organisation and have always been so. So the main difference in my working day is I have my family here rather than just a dog. So it's a slightly surreal situation in which things don't feel that different. There isn't a major change. Certainly as an organisation, there are a couple of events that we had planned that we've had to cancel, which I know is something that's happened to many others. But we're in a very fortunate situation where we are. We're fortunate where we live. We have a nice house. We have a garden. We have a dog to take for a walk. We have many things that I know not everyone has in these circumstances. So from a personal point of view, it's actually not a major disruption.
Okay, so the message I think then for a lot of people is that who are normally trapped on a commuter train going to London or somewhere, Alistair, a great example of someone who's doing all their work already, working from home, using all the IT tools. So that's fantastic. So Alistair, over to you to tell us about Population Matters, please.
Great, thanks very much. Just give me a second and I will share my screen. Here we go. Right then, can everyone see my screen? Are we working successfully there?
Fantastic, that's a really good quality screen. Thank you, Alistair.
Excellent, thanks very much. So, yeah, I mean, it's a real pleasure for us to be involved in this discussion. Well, I'll introduce a little bit more about Population Matters in a moment, but the first thing to say is that our name does not indicate that we think population is the only issue that we should be paying attention to. It's fantastic to listen into and be involved in this part of discussion, because clearly there are a vast range of things that need to be done and need to be addressed to tackle all our environmental problems, including climate change. Really, the role of Population Matters is to say, and this is one. If we look at population and the impact of population and the solutions to population, that's got to be a core part of how we solve the problems that we're in across the board, really. So this is not about saying population is the only thing that matters. Very far from it. And as I talk through what we're doing, then I hope that'll become clear. So we've been going for about 30 years. We're a UK registered charity with international reach. You can read here, our vision is of a future in which our population coexists in harmony with nature and prospers on a healthy planet to the benefit of all. And I think that to the benefit of all is a very important part of our vision statement. being concerned about the number of people on the planet does not mean not liking people or not wanting people to have a good life. Very much the opposite. We all benefit, and I think we all recognize that the changes that we're all talking about now, the build back better after coronavirus, they improve people's lives, and that's exactly how population solutions go. So what we do as an organization, we campaign for changes in policy that will help to address sustainability of population, and I'll talk more about those later. A very important part of what we do is informing, ensuring that people understand what the issues are with population, why it's important, in particular, about how the solutions, the positive solutions which are there, which can be employed and will make a difference. We do research looking into those solutions, looking into the problems, looking into the link between population and problems that we have. And the last thing we do is empower. We empower in two ways. One is we believe we empower, as many of the people involved in these sessions do, through informing people, getting them engaged in our activities. But also we do a small amount of work actually on the ground, supporting partners who do empowerment, family planning projects, women's empowerment projects in the UK and abroad. And it's a small part of what we do, but it's something that we're very proud of. It's on the ground stuff. Just to celebrate Earth Day, I just wanted to share briefly a picture of Bigfoot. The only thing about pictures of Bigfoot is you don't get a full sense of how big he is. He's actually about 6.5 feet tall. And you may be able to see from these photographs, he's a fantastic prop in real life. He's made of steel, and you can see on the head there what he's actually made of is babies. And he's standing upon the earth and squashing the earth. Again, that does not mean that we dislike babies, but I think when we take Bigfoot out, people intuitively understand a lot of people puts pressure on the earth, and it's not a difficult message, and people understand it. So a little bit of background before we go on to talk about climate change specifically. I think many people are familiar with this curve, but it's worth noting that until the time of Napoleon, there were less than 1 billion people on the earth. I was born in 1963, and the population has more than doubled in my lifetime. We add about 80 million people a year to about the population of Germany every year at the moment still. And one very good way of getting a sense of how that has changed things is this graphic. You may have seen this graphic in other forms, which talk about the biomass, the weight of vertebrates on the earth. And actually there are different calculations as to exactly what the balance is, but they're all pretty similar. That from moving from a situation in which the biomass on the earth was 99% wild animals, it's now much smaller. It's ourselves, our livestock, and I'm sure others have spoken about the impact of livestock there. I've also seen this estimated at 3% wild animals, not 1%, but I think it really brings home just how much in a very short period of time we changed the planet that we live on. And then another important thing to talk about as regards population, and a very important piece of context, is many people have heard that population is plateauing, that this isn't going to be a problem anymore. Well, first, a number of us already is a problem, sadly, but also population is not plateauing. These are the most recent projections from the United Nations, and they anticipate that there is a 75% chance that population will still be rising at the end of this century. So far from plateauing, the rate of growth is absolutely slowing down, but remember that rate of growth is on top of, we're already growing. Rate of growth doesn't mean you're not adding more people. We're still looking, there is a chance, and we'll talk about this when we look at solutions, that we can bend that curve downwards if we take action. But unless we take action, it will continue to go up. And it's also important to say that these projections are based on the assumption that we actually take some of that we improve family planning and these kinds of things, which won't necessarily happen. So population is not a thing that's being solved next week. But we all know essentially what the driver of our problems is. It's exploding human consumption that's leading to the problem. But of course, when we talk about consumption, there are many factors that go into consumption. We're all aware of the overconsumption that we have, which we'll talk about. But fundamentally, the number of consumers makes a difference. Of course, there's vast inequalities in we consume, but we actually do all need some basics of land, water, food, and infrastructure, energy, all these things. No matter what we do, when we add more people, we're adding more demand in that way. So the question is, are there things that we can do to address that? And again, people will, I'm sure, are familiar with this. Currently, we're overusing the Earth's renewable resources. And unless things change, we will need the equivalent of 3 Earths by 2050. So I'm sure already people have been talking about the things that need to change, and in particular the techniques that we need, the methods that we need to use to address climate change. If we can really embrace those and do them, we'll bring down this consumption a lot. But that's the impact that we're having at the moment. And I touched on that issue of inequality. This graphic, I think, which uses information from the Global Footprint Network, really emphasizes that the way we live, we can be smug in comparison to the United States, but if everyone lived like as we do in the UK, we would need nearly 3 Earths in order to sustain us. We live in a world of grotesque and of deeply, profoundly offensive injustice in the distribution and use of resources. But that doesn't mean that there are always going to be enough resources to go around, or indeed that the Earth can continue to renew them no matter how we redistribute. And I just want to very quickly, because it's Earth Day, just take a moment to talk about biodiversity. We rightly talk about the climate change challenge, but the reality is that we are facing another existential threat, which is biodiversity loss. At the moment, its relationship with population through habitat change, through exploitation, is very, very clear. But there are many things that we need to do to address that moment. But please, we must never forget when we're talking about climate change, how important the biodiversity crisis is as well. And indeed, climate change is one of the threats that are there, but I'll move on from that. So when we come to climate change, it's not a revelation that the number of people on the Earth makes a difference there. And indeed, the IPCC itself has said this and identified high population growth as one of the threats to meeting the 1.5 or even the 2 degrees target. But when we talk about climate change, it's very important to recognize again this vast inequality. I'm sure people are very familiar with these. You look at CO2 consumption emissions per person on the right, and you see the vast disparity in different places on the Earth. But I think it's also important that we look at the graph on the left, CO2 emissions per country. And the 3 largest emitters in the world are the USA, China, and India. And there are many reasons, including the use of coal, why that's the case. But in the case of China and India, the 2 largest countries in the world, population is a driver there. We can't ignore that. All of which is not to say, when we look at this, just how grotesque those differences are. These figures on carbon dioxide emissions per person are a little bit old. But when we were putting this graphic together, it was very hard to actually get Niger, the relationship between Niger and the USA on that, because there's more than 160 times the average person in the United States produces. And this goes to one of the first things, the issues about solutions, which is the changes that we can make as individuals, and in particular in places where we are wealthy. This does not mean that we should not be doing any of the other things, but some research a little while ago looked into the effectiveness of different individual actions that we could take. I won't talk through all of these, but that research indicated that one of the most effective, or the most effective step that we could take would be having one fewer child. And it stands to reason. A person inevitably is going to be using, no matter how they reduce their footprint, is going to be responsible for emissions. Now, it has to be said, this particular piece of research has been repeated a lot. There are some assumptions that underlie it, which I think are potentially questionable. But I think we can simplify it in looking at this. If we look at consumption emissions in the UK, for one person per year, we're looking at nearly 12 tonnes. That dwarfs is significantly higher than the major things that we would think of in terms of carbon emissions. And so having fewer people within the developed world really makes a difference to that. And it's a choice that we are very fortunate to have, how many children we have. Those of us who are in a position where we're thinking about our family size at moment, it's a positive, very positive choice that we can make, and which many people are. This is a picture of Big Baby, who we took to the just outside Parliament a few months ago. And he was really making that point. You can see he's holding a small plane in his hand there. Not to say that people shouldn't fly by any, or should continue to fly by any manner of means, but just to recognise the impact that the choices that we make have. Again, this is not in any way criticising babies. I've had one myself. I was one myself. They're wonderful things. But I think there's more solid research about this, about the impact. And I've talked there about the choices that we can make as individuals in the developed world. But actually, Project Drawdown, which people may be familiar with, investigated existing solutions, not technological solutions or political solutions necessarily, but solutions that we could implement just now. A major piece of research in 2017. And these are its top findings here. and for reasons that I'll talk about in a minute, the effects of women's empowerment are to take more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere in a period up until 2050 than all wind turbines put together. In fact, combined, the elements that go into women's empowerment are more effective than anything else. And that is because they reduce family size and reduce population growth. And that research, it's been renewed, and the figures are slightly different today, but very similar. So what are those solutions that we're talking about? How am I doing for time, by the way, Charles?
Oh, this is great. Yeah.
Okay.
I've not got long, but keep going, Alistair.
That's great. Thank you. So when we talk about solutions, this is really, this is possibly the most important graph that I might show. This shows the difference. If global fertility rates were to be half a child on average, lower than the UN currently anticipated, what a difference it could make to population. If it was half a child more than the UN currently anticipates, on average, we'd be looking at a population of 16 billion people on the planet, more than double that we have today in a century. If it was half a child less, just half a child less on average per family, we're looking at a population that's smaller than the one we have today. Very small changes in fertility lead to very large changes in population. And achieving those small changes in fertility is actually not difficult. And this is the recipe. It's very straightforward. End poverty, empower women and girls, education, good quality universal education, modern family planning, that people have access to it, that they are free to use it and they choose to use it, and promote smaller families. These are positive steps that empower people and improve their lives. Every single one of them is a good thing to do in itself, and implementing these things makes a huge difference. And I talked earlier on about how the UN projections make assumptions about what's going to happen in the future. And I think this is very important to say. Many of those of us, most people watching this will have a free choice, largely have a free choice about their family size. That's not the case. Globally, right now, 270 million women, overwhelmingly in less developed countries, do not have an unmet need for contraception at the moment for modern family planning. That doesn't mean they necessarily can't access it. It means for one reason or another they can't use it. And I think what's shocking when you look at these figures is enormous work has been done to address that in recent years, and it is not keeping pace. We are not making the targets on that. By 2030, more women are projected not to have that access because of population growth. That's one of the other reasons we may be shrinking the percentage of people who don't have access, but the actual number of women who are facing those situations and people who are facing that situation is growing. We have to do more. Coronavirus certainly threatens aid in future for family planning. It's already having a very negative impact on provision of family planning and women's empowerment right now, and it's very concerning. It's vital that we continue to do that. With those kind of solutions that I talk about, a really big difference can be made. The bar chart here shows what was done in really a couple of generations. Massive changes through positive, empowering solutions. Nothing to do with coercion, nothing to do with forcing people what to do, forcing their hands. It's about providing people with those tools of empowerment, family planning, women's empowerment, education, and the huge difference that it can make. And these effective family planning things bring down the family size, bring down population growth in those places where people don't have the same choices that we have here. And so finally, just to round off, that is actually a picture of the announcement of the birth of the most recent royal baby there. We love all babies, but that's someone who's going to be emitting quite a lot, I would imagine. When you read, as many of us do, the multiple reports come out from the IPCC, on biodiversity, from many things. There are two words that strike me over and over again when I read those. And the first is catastrophic. Look, what we face is catastrophe, unless we do something. And the second word that always strikes me is transformation, that the changes we need to make are transformatory changes. They're not incremental. And over and over and over again, those words recur. And one of the key messages, again, in the IPCC have said, is you do not leave solutions off the table in the situation that we're in at the moment. Addressing population is one solution which we can do positively. And I leave really, or almost leave, with this brilliant encapsulation of the issue from our patron, who we're very fortunate to have, Sir David Attenborough. All our environmental problems become easier to solve with fewer people and harder, ultimately impossible to solve with ever more people. People understand that intuitively. It makes such sense. So long as we keep adding people, we're making it more difficult for all our other solutions to work. That is a thing we can address positively and ethically, and it should be part of the solutions. And then finally, I'll just leave with this, which is one of my favorite of the many signs that appear at Extinction Rebellion and other demos. It's such an important message. That's my presentation.
Alistair, that's fantastic. You've really increased my understanding of this massively. The data that you have here, I thought was really excellent. So thank you so much. I was talking to people about tree planting, and people are just in the this last year. What's happened is that there's a number of initiatives now where people are talking about planting 1 trillion trees. So this last year, thanks to the efforts of Greta and Extinction Rebellion and the school strike, so what happened then is that people's awareness of climate change, the importance of dealing with climate change, shot up. So now 70% or so of people in the UK are aware of and concerned about climate change. So you've made a very persuasive presentation. What sort of, just in the UK, to keep it simple, what sort of awareness and understanding do you think percentage-wise you have in the UK of the sort of message you're talking about, Alistair?
It's hard to answer that one percentage-wise. Globally, I think Pew does a regular investigation to what people consider to be problems, and population always comes high on that list. And of course, we've got to be conscious that a lot of people are living in places where the perils and downside of population are very, very obvious, particularly in the countries. They aren't necessarily as obvious to us. We may have a crowded tube train, but maybe that just means there should be, not anymore, or not at present, but it may mean we need more tube trains. But certainly what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years is far, far more attention on this question of population, in particular on the choice of family size. The recognition that this is a choice that those people who are in their childbearing years, who are at that stage in their life, can make, and it's a positive choice. And when I started at Population Matters 3 years ago, those stories just simply didn't appear. And you look at my media monitoring software that I use, it sends these things to me, and I see a really significant step change in that. It's now starting to be part of the discussion, and I think people are recognizing that it's not, and again, other speakers have certainly said, it's not about telling people what to do. It's saying these are the range of choices that you have. You don't have to necessarily pick R1. You certainly shouldn't only pick one. But this is a choice that people have, and unquestionably that's being recognised far more than it was even just a few years ago. And obviously the awareness that people like Extinction Rebellion have generated has contributed to that too.
Super, thanks for that, Alistair. As I say, for me, it was seeing your campaign on London buses that made the difference. So that's great. I suggest you do have some more buses when those are running and people are back in London. But do let us have your presentation. We'd be pleased to link that to your details and put that out on the Facebook page. So Garry, do you have any questions coming in? Otherwise, we'll just roll on to talk to Sue Hindle. Garry,
well, we're running late.
Hi,
yeah, I'm looking forward to Sue. Respect for her time, and lots of reaction.
Yeah.
Alistair, fantastic. In fact, an outstanding presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Sue, very welcome to you. How are you?
Hello, Charles. Hi, I'm fine. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
You're a little bit soft. Can you come nearer to the microphone?
The microphone. Lean in, yes. Is that
I think that's. I think.
Let me tip it back a wee bit.
Garry, what do you? A bit loud.
Does that work?
Can you get it?
Yeah, just
project. It's not that loud. But yeah, you're going to have to speak.
Project your voice.
Project my voice a bit.
There you go. Okay. Some Alexander techniques.
Alexander techniques, okay. Since I've done those, I must say. But
I'm really pleased you can. I'm really pleased you can join us today. We've had most of the speakers have been about some aspect of climate change. Now, where you are, Sue, I know what you'll be talking about today is a little bit different. Just to set the scene for everybody, Sue's been working for many years now for a wonderful organization that helps people in times of stress and disaster. And so it's about you and the International Association for Human Values have been doing is you work with disaster. This is about picking people up and with a disaster in their lives by a flood or a volcano or whatever, and it's helping people with their state of mind, with their livelihood, and all of these sorts of things. Now, the subject I think for today is really that because of climate change, we are undoubtedly, or this is what the scientists say anyway, we're going to have more climate disasters, we're going to have stronger hurricanes, we're going to have more problems. So it's going to be a lot more work for someone like yourself, Sue, and your team. But let's start with the basics. Tell us about tell us about what you do to help people in this area of stress and trauma.
Well, firstly, I've mentioned occasionally, Charles, you sound like you're underwater, so I hope you're receiving me loud and clear.
Charles, can I suggest something? If there's anyone else on the internet in your house, ask them to take
I'm
that
all
off,
on
Charles.
my own, and this is the only thing streaming, so we're fine.
No,
I mean,
Sue, you're okay.
Okay,
Great.
okay. Righto. So, who am I and what do I do? Well, for the last 20 years, I've been volunteering for a couple of organizations called International Association for Human Values and its sister organization, The Art of Living. And these are two organizations that have been set up by one of India's foremost humanitarian leaders of the present time, Sri Ravi Shankar. And they are organizations which are astonishing basically in the breadth and width and depth of their vision in terms of the way they tackle virtually all of the current woes of the world, if you see what I mean. So it's a very, very broad-based series of initiatives that are run all over the world. And I'm very much involved with the UK organisations, but also because I've been an international travelling teacher for some time, I'm very much involved likewise in the international aspects of what we do. And it's a very, like I say, wide-ranging thing. And basically, the approach that's taken generally in tackling all of these problems, including climate change, stress and anxiety and such like that come out of them, have basically been geared up in terms of answering the sustainable development goals. Even before sustainable development goals were thought of, our organizations have such a breadth that they deal with virtually all of the aspects on that that come up with that. So it's a very interesting broad spectrum. Now, in terms of climate change, if I run through the overall picture first and then drill down into the aspect, Charles, that you asked me to focus on particularly, because if we just look at that, it gives a distorted picture. First of all, the organizations address climate change head on in terms of reducing the carbon footprint, carbon footprints and such like. So particularly in India, they have some really big, exciting initiatives for renewable energy, where they're rolling out solar panel initiatives in the rural areas that currently have no electricity at all. So they're going out into the wilds and basically getting them all geared up, but using the most modern cutting edge solar options. So they have a large number of solar microgrids, for example, and they have solar battery charging stations, which are very economic for the communities to run by. They work with training local entrepreneurs to deal with all of this kind of thing. And Also women's empowerment. They've got the women in the communities very much involved with all of this. So there's a big initiative for reducing carbon footprints in terms of working with renewable energy. And they're really pretty ahead of the game with all of that, from what I can tell. In addition, there's very ambitious programs that have been enormously successful for rejuvenating waterways and water systems. In India has been a huge problem with drought, with so many river networks having completely dried up and farmers committing suicide. They simply don't have enough water to basically survive. And they've had enormous success in working with river rejuvenation, which brings the water table up, and they plant the trees associated with that. And it's a really powerful tool for combating drought and such like, as one of the aspects of climate change. And they've done a lot of really good work with that, and that's something that can be continued with. And then, of course, tree planting, lots and lots of tree planting, but we can come back to that. You've heard lots about tree planting, I guess, across this afternoon. Then another strategy is that basically recognizing that human beings are a very significant agent of change and main players in influencing climate change and carbon consumption and such like. There's a very significant education, awareness and community responsibility programs. And they're really doing a lot with that, working with people in, working with the people in the communities and out there to actually take responsibility for their own environments and their own communities and such like. And they've been very successful in that. They've had huge programs running for, I don't know, 20 years plus, with local communities, empowering them to manage their environment, reduce the carbon footprint, increase water sustainability, planting trees and such like. Organic farming is another one. It's part of the whole environmental picture that we do. Then we have we respond very effectively to crises as they occur. So we're having increasing natural disaster crises of flooding and fire, landslides, hurricanes, and all of that sort of thing. And over the last, well, since the tsunami, really, we got going in a big way with tsunami, in really mobilizing our organizations to provide disaster relief at all stages post-disaster. So particularly in India, where we've got a really huge volunteer base, they are very effective now at being there on the spot for the first phase response teams. So they're there with their medical teams and their food and their tents and clean water and all that kind of thing. They do a massive amount of work with that. They've run camps where refugees from floods and stuff come and stay, and they provide food, accommodation, everything that's needed in huge numbers. I mean, unimaginable numbers. And they rally very considerable support from within Indian communities. Our organizations are essentially volunteer-based organizations.
So I think, so what would be good is I know that the tsunami, which was back in 2005, I mean, that was a massive wake-up call to people, partly because it happened on Boxing Day, and the impact of that was absolutely massive. But that was not a climate event itself. So I think what people would be interested to hear about in the context of today is if you could talk a little bit more about something that is climate, hurricane or floods or whatever related, and a bit more specifically about what International Association for Human Values and Art of Living actually do in this situation? I mean, what do you encounter, and what programs do you run, and how does it help people?
And Sue, I have a request. If you could swivel round your lampshade to point towards you, that would. There we go. Just a little bit more.
That might bleach the screen. That's the trouble.
Oh, towards you. Illuminate you.
All right. Okay. Well, as long as you don't mind that bright glow in the left-hand side, then that's fine. Yeah. The lighting here again.
It's angelic.
It's angelic. I'm
Yeah.
angelic. Well, if I put my head there, you can see the halo. How about that?
Extra points, Sue. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So yeah. Sorry. I find it strange to talk to myself. I can see you there now, Charles. But it's I'm very used to put me in front of 1,000 people on a stage and I won't bat an eyelid. Stick me in front of a camera on a computer, and it's very bizarre.
Okay, well, Gary's got me trained. I've done Gary's training course, Sue. So it's good. I recommend it. Okay, so
Sue, you're coming across perfectly well, and your voice is carrying perfectly.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm pleased to hear that. And so, yeah, it's good to have the interaction, Charles. I appreciate that too, because it gives focus in sorting that. Now, you asked me, what do we do with natural disaster, with climate change disasters, really? So, if we take a recent one, there was Kerala. There was very severe flooding in Kerala recently, a couple of years back. And so immediately we did the things that I was outlining to you just now. We had camps where we took people who had been basically displaced out of their homes, and we accommodated with them with tents and food and water and all of those things. We can do this in India, the first stage relief. All of that was done, but the thing that we do, which is maybe, which is the most unusual, is that we have very significant trauma relief programs. Basically, this organization comes from India, right? And so within India, they have this very significant tradition of, yoga tradition from the Vedic times. The ancient rishis really understood how to deal with human beings, how the human being works. They really understood the whole mind-body system, how trauma affects people, how the breath influences people, and that kind of thing. And so these ancient techniques out of India, the breathing, the meditation, the yoga, etc., can be very much employed in this day and age with programs to assist with our current problems. So Sri Ravi Shankar, what he's done is he's drawn on the ancient tradition to put together very effective programs for the 21st century to help everybody today to deal with what they're going through. But essentially, the human being hasn't changed all that much over the years, over thousands of years. And so we've developed over the last 10 or 15 years, in particular, that I've been involved with, these very specific trauma relief programs where we go in and we work with the people with very, very simple practices from the ancient traditions, basically breathing techniques, meditation, wisdom, simple points, simple attitude recommendation, points of wisdom. Basically, what stresses us out in life isn't what happens to us, it's our attitude to what happens to us.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say then, Sue, is that you've got people coming in who are exhibiting real trauma and stress from their loss caused by the disaster. You're able to give them a breathing-based program and then help them really to get back to a normality so that they can get back on with their life. Is that what you were saying?
Absolutely right. So basically they come in, a lot of people totally frozen with stress and anxiety and really low disabled, basically entirely disempowered by their experiences and stuck. And
okay, this is a great phrase. I mean, disabled by stress. This is an amazing phrase, Sue.
Oh, good, right. Well, we're on my familiar territory now.
Okay, yeah, well, please tell us a bit more about it. So just so people can understand, what's the difference between this? People know about yoga, people know about meditation. So do you want to tell us a bit more about what's different about what you're doing? It's obviously it's something different from meditation and yoga, yeah?
Well, it's basically a combination. Basically, what we do is we put together a process of different approaches, both breathing and yoga and intellectual, that wisdom points, in such a way as a process which basically has the effect of has a very deep transformational effect on the individual. It works on the whole mind-body system. But basically, it's recognized that the human being has a number of layers, right? So we have our mind. If we start at the gross layer, the body, the breath, the mind, the intellect, the memory, and the ego and self are layers that every single human being has. All these different aspects make up who we are. And when we get stressed and traumatized, stuck in one of these very difficult phases, what happens is that the balance of these layers gets out of sync, and the whole system paralyzes, freezes, gets stuck or blocked, or however you want to express it. And with this range of processes that we use, they work in different ways on all of these different processes. So basically, if you work with the yoga, you're dealing with the body, and the breath is the link between the mind and the body. Then there's the wisdom points. Those assist the intellect. The intellect needs to understand. So basically, the process of a combination of the techniques that we use, drawn quite a wide range of techniques, has a systematic effect on all of these different layers, which basically brings people back into sync. And in doing that, it brings relaxation, re-energizes, and brings people back to focus and back to themselves. Once they're rebalanced, they're okay again. They're back to normal. So basically, the stress, the trauma puts everybody out of balance, and the practices and the processes bring people back to balance. And by continuing to work with the processes, you can sustain and maintain that balance. They're very, very, I would say that I've worked, sorry, Charles, you're gone into the goldfish bowl. I can't hear you.
Okay, let's try again. Gary, tell me if you can't hear me. Okay, so what we've been hearing about today is some trigger points. So we've been hearing about the trigger point from the melting of the Arctic ice, from the release of CO2 and methane from the tundra. And we've also been hearing about from Rob from Brazil, we've been hearing about the risk of, if a bit more, too much Amazon is cut down, there's a risk of the Amazon just drying out. So what all this means, Sue, is that there's a big risk of having a lot more climate disasters. So obviously in India, you've got a lot of volunteers, you've got a lot of activities. So in other parts of the world, do you want to just round off by telling us about what you're able to do with your organisation in other parts of the world? I mean, for example, something in the UK or Europe or the US.
Yeah, please come in and I'll set you up.
And
thank you for your patience. Excellent. I'll let you in as a panelist.
Basically, what we do from the UK is we support international initiatives. Not so many countries have the ability to put in the first stage response after a trauma, but we can mobilize people to go in and run the courses and the programs for the trauma relief and stress management to get people back to normal again afterwards. So there was an issue in Mexico, and so teams went in from the US and various places to work there to help bring the people, to help rehabilitate the people following the landslides and all that, and all the problems that they had out there.
We have a question from Colleen.
In Australia, they've just had the fires, and the team there are very much looking at bringing these programs in say third or fourth stage to help with trauma relief for all the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who were running from the fires in the east coast of Australia earlier this year, my daughter and family included. So basically, what we do is ultimately flexible, and we can send teams in after the event to work with the local populations to help them release the stress.
Sue, that's so powerful and traumatic, but Colleen has a question for you. Do you teach only the people who come in, or their children too? Trauma carries through generations.
Absolutely, it totally does. And yes, of course, yes, we have very effective children's programs. So we work with everybody. And IAHV UK, which is the organisation I head up, we've been working with the Syrian youth refugees in the camps of Lebanon and Jordan. This isn't actually climate change, but it's effectively the same programs. It doesn't make much difference what's triggered the trauma. The programs work in the same way. So we've been working astonishingly effectively over the last 3 years with very large numbers of Syrian youth in the refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan, also with the host communities and with their families. And I was out in Tripoli in early December, astonished to see the end results. They had a final closing event in which I don't know,
stop.
Of these youth were actually going on stage. So young people who were too traumatized even to talk in a small group before were now in front of me on the stage, singing, performing, speaking. Astonishing.
How does that make you feel?
Amazing. And you think, oh, it's all been worthwhile. Listen, it's not easy, some of this stuff. It really isn't. So it really makes you feel, wow, yes. And our people are becoming more and more skilled. The more we do it, the more skilled we get at it, and the stronger our teams become. And we're working more and more internationally now with our American brothers and sisters. And
you have a remarkable story.
America and Canada and India and Australia and you name it. We all
Again, to use another Gandhi quote, he says that society is based on how we look after the vulnerable and the sick and the elderly and the young. So you are doing such a great job to make the world a better place.
Indeed. Well, this is human values for you, right? Caring, sharing, tolerance, and all the rest of it. And I can tell you, we're going to need a whole lot more of that as this climate change story rolls down, because you get two sides of the story, don't you? You get one, the people who are stressed out of their brains because of the climate story, because of the climate, because they've lost their homes, their livelihood, their very existence is threatened.
Do you mind? Our time is almost up, but we have a very important question from Ruth. How do people become volunteers to support your work?
Just by waving your hand in the air or sending me an email or something. At the end of this, I can, you want a brief synopsis with contacts and stuff, don't you? From the speakers.
Certainly do, yeah.
I can put all that on there. But yeah, and we're, the resources that we need are, one, money, of course, same as everybody else. And as a charity, we've got the whole gift aid thing for the UK people to get the tax break on it. 2, we really need support in terms of infrastructure, project writers, report writing, just keeping up with it all. It's really hard work. And the more that there is to do, the more support we need of IT, social media, newsletter writing, scripting of all sorts, basically. The more the merrier. And wherever you are listening to this, we really are all over the world. 155 countries around the world actually have Art of Living and or IAHV organizations. And
well, Sue, I have to acknowledge you and let Roland on, because Roland, bless him, he's the last speaker, and he's had the knock-on effect of us running late.
Totally.
So, Sue, let me just say thank you so much, Sue, for joining us.
Yeah.
What you said about Australia and the fires and the work you're doing following that, I think that very much resonates with people in the UK. People were just shocked at the scale and scope of those fires. And what I'd say to people is, look, you've got this amazing international organisation. If you are across the world in different places, then do reach out to Sue to put you in contact with the appropriate part of her organisations. So, Sue, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Okay, righto. Thanks,
Bravo.
guys.
Okay.
Good show, by the way. Very good.
Great. Thank you, Sue. Thanks for your support.
Okay.
Hi, Roland.
Hi, Charles. How are you?
Good. Now, I know you're only just down the road, but the internet connection just here has not been great. So it's maybe going to need a bit of investment to get this fully up to scratch. But otherwise, my message is that Earth Day 2020 has nearly broken the internet, which is good. Yeah, that's very good. Okay. So, Roland, thanks ever so much for joining us. So just before we get into this, a lot of people now are working at home, they're finding things very different. So in terms of the lockdown that we've been through, is there any big difference for yourself personally?
Well, it's slightly different for me because, as you remember, I left my company a few weeks ago. But actually there was a degree of change for me in that, where I would normally expect to be visiting customers physically up and down the country at least once or twice a week. Of course, we were no longer doing that. So there have been changes, and of course there are changes for family as well, and changes in the way we behave when we're outside the house. I mean, I can tell that I'm doing far less than I was because there's money left in my bank account at the end of the month.
Okay, well that's you're one of the lucky ones then, because there's a lot of stories of people who are.
Well, I know. I am privileged. So you're right. In that I'm okay for certainly for the time being. But,
now, Roland, the reason for inviting you to join us today is because you're one of the you think the few, you're the only person really talking about business, and you've got a great business story. You work for one of the biggest IT companies in the world. That company in the UK wanted to do something about climate change. They asked you to work for them, and you presented to the MD and their board about what they could do about climate change. So I think it'd be great to hear the story. That's a synopsis. So it'd be great to hear the story from you, because there's going to be other people out there who work for companies, small, medium or large companies. And I think for me, it's very inspiring for anybody who works for one of these companies about how you went to the MD of the company with a climate change oriented proposition, and they did something about it. So start from the beginning of the story, and do tell us about why they actually wanted to do something about it. Because we hear far too many stories about people going to the management and they say, well, look, we're not interested, or wait 10 years and don't come back or something. Yeah. So tell us about this.
Okay, absolutely, no problem at all. And I hope everyone who's out of the people that are watching, there'll be a few of you that will try and mirror what we managed to start off and are successful. I think there's a great scope for change within businesses. They do spend a lot of money on moving people around the world, and undertake all sorts of activities that are part of generating CO2 and damaging the environment in other ways. So let me start. I'll give you a brief bit of background, and then I'll dive into the content. So I wanted to give you a bit of backstory. I've always been, and I've told you this before, Charles, and also Garry, I've always been one of those people that nodded very wisely when they saw news items or things on the telly or things on the internet about how the climate was being ruined and temperatures were going up, and I would nod, oh, that's terrible, we should do something about that. And then I had my road to Damascus moment about a little bit over a year now. I saw Greta Thunberg present to Davos, and by the end of her speech, I think I saw a short 2.5 minute version. By the end of that 2.5 minutes, I had changed my opinion, and I'd come to believe that I needed to take responsibility for my own actions and also to have a part in fighting climate change. So that's where I started off from, and I made all sorts of changes myself, and I was able to affect me and my own family, my immediate family, and also some of my friends and to some extent. So we did all the things you would expect. We flew less, quite significantly less. We changed our provider of electricity to a green provider. So our stuff comes from wind farms. I changed my car to a smaller one. We changed our diet, less meat. All sort of relatively reasonably easy stuff to do. But what I wanted to do was then magnify my efforts beyond that. So I was looking for something that I could do that would help other people to make those changes as well. And one of the things that I found was what was at work. So as you said, I work, or rather worked, for a large American corporation, over 100,000 people. And not everyone will work for a big place like that, but there's scope to do what I'm about to describe in any sized organisation at all. Whether there are 2 of you, 200 of you, 2,000 or 200,000, it's I was quite lucky to fall into something that was kind of half happening already. But for other people, you'll have to kick it off yourself. So I will say that the organisation that I worked for is not in any way green at the top. In fact, it's a matter of public record that the founder of our company and some of the senior management are supporters of Trump, who is no friend of the planet, as we know. But they have been forced, mainly by customers, but to some extent by employees, to pay attention to the environment and to some extent greenwash themselves.
Okay, so Roland, let's just hold it at that point, because we're talking about what business managers could achieve, right? So you're now saying that a major company has made changes because of what the customers have said, right? And because of what the employees have said. So this is now a much bigger group of people. You don't have to be a senior manager company to be able to do something.
No.
As an employee, as a customer, you can say to your supplier, look, we need you to change. This is a massive message, Roland. Absolutely.
That's all you need to do. When you're having people bid for work at your place, ask them what their green policies are. Try and set some sort of standard. There are all sorts of things, and by employees, a lot of it is younger people. So every old-fashioned business is having trouble attracting young people. Young people want to have a different desire out of life. They want a better work-life mix, and they want to work for a company of which they can feel proud. And one of the aspects, one of the things that will make them feel proud is whether or not that company is responsible. It takes responsibility for its actions and tries to reduce its impact on the environment. And that's absolutely a problem. And that's been a big driver for my organisation. Absolutely, it is.
Sure.
Yeah. So they're forced to change, and they over the last, actually, bless them, they've done really well. They started in facilities, so they've only been counting CO2 attributable to our buildings, of which there are a lot. And over the last 5 years, they've halved the CO2. And they've mainly done that by, modernising building controls, modernising heating plant, switching to green providers of energy, or even there are even a few self-generation projects, where they're using solar cells or what have you. But there was a recognition about a year ago that they were going to be unable to make any more significant changes. So a year ago, when after they have a yearly meeting, for which they all fly to America, which always makes me laugh. They haven't, it's like they haven't quite got it yet. 30 people fly to America. So anyway, and they decided they were going to have to turn attention to employer behaviour and how the business conducted itself to be able to make further changes. And by that I mean, changing the way that we travel, maybe doing more work at home, changing how we behave when we're in the offices and the things we use and do. And there was a bit of a chicken and egg thing going on. There was, in a few countries, there were various local efforts by people that were concerned about climate or concerned about the ecology. And they basically, what my organisation said is, well, we're going to support those people. And they employed someone full-time as a coordinator, and they invented the name Green Teams. And they offered support to local groups to get started and to have an effect. So what Green Teams do is typically they are volunteers from the local country, and they do all sorts of different things in different countries. And you'll appreciate that in some countries they're further ahead than others, right? So in some countries they are doing things like putting in electric vehicle chargers. In other countries, they are, removing plastic straws. We've done things like improve recycling, and there have been education programs. Some offices have gone paperless. There were some big wins in the UK. We managed to get electric vehicle expenses. You get a certain amount per mile paid when you use your own vehicle. And if you use a petrol vehicle, you get 45p where I work per mile. And we managed to get electric vehicles put at the same amount. And now, given that most people are paying sort of 3 or 4 pence a mile for their electricity and electric vehicles, this is a big incentive for people doing miles on the behalf of the company to buy an electric car. So we were able to do that. We had a local cycle scheme where you were able to buy a bike more cheaply than you would normally if you use it for commuting. But there was a limit on that, which we got raised so that people could buy electric bikes, which effectively sort of doubled the distance from which they could commute in. And if you think about it being a circle that big before, when it's a circle that big, it hasn't just doubled in size, it's 4 times the size. So all sorts of things like that. There were countries, I think in Germany, they gave every single person in the company a reusable cup, and they banned single-use cups. In other countries like the UK, they reduced the cost for hot drinks in the office if you brought a reusable cup to the place. So all sorts of things. There were some incredible things.
Roland, from a marketing perspective, the benefits of that, because I beat the drum for Charles. I say that every time you sell a cup of coffee, why not plant a tree in Madagascar? I think that the benefits outweigh the pain of having to change. In any organization, change is painful. The logistics of having to get rid of those plastic straws. Do you know my son? He has predicted that if he stores plastic straws for 50 years, they'll be worth lots of money one day. They'll be extinct.
It could be right. It could be right.
So there you go. But how far, if you were to scale it on your big corporate company, How far do you think there is to go? So you've made a third of changes, 2/3 of changes. How much more have we got to see from corporates?
So I think the problem is that we don't really know. The company had carefully audited itself on facilities, but had not done an audit on how much CO2 we generate by our business activities. Wow. And I suspect that it's going to be an awful lot. You know, we're an IT company, flying salespeople, technical people, and consulting people around the world. You know, there are. If you think of a typical scenario, there might be 30 people working in Edinburgh for 18 months, most of whom will fly there from the south, stay for the week, and then fly back again the week after.
Does your instinct say that this will catch on? This?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So there's pressure from customers, there's pressure from employees, and I think that it will just become a part of life. I'll give you an example. We recently, not in this country, but in Scandinavia, we agreed with a customer because they had some really quite tough requirements for suppliers about how green their suppliers were. We agreed with them that we would massively reduce the physical movement of people. You know, so we've agreed to do a piece of business for them, which is going to last like 9 months or something. You know, with X number of people, and typically that would generate thousands and thousands of flights. You know, just that one single job alone. And we've agreed basically to reduce all that to nothing, and that where we do have to fly or we do have to travel, we will seek to use less polluting forms of travel, so train if we can, and if we still have to travel, then we will offset.
Well, yeah, offsetting is that makes Charles smile. Planting trees. Charles, have you got a question? Charles? It's gone quiet. For me, I'm so glad we finished with you because it's a great story. I know I don't care how it happens. If it makes the corporates more money, they're going to be happy with that. And I think they're realizing it, in the long run, it will make them more money.
So Garry, can you hear me actually, Garry?
Yes.
You can. Great. So apologies everybody for the internet. I'm getting this signal. Your internet connection is unstable. We definitely need to turn everything else in the house off. It's so off. It's all turned off. Yeah, it's definitely turned off. It's not to do with me, Garry.
Oh, you haven't paid your bill, Charles.
I mean, my comment is, sorry?
Sorry,
Roland?
Bill.
You haven't paid the bill yet.
You need to put 50p in the meter.
He's gone again.
Look, I tell you what, Garry. I've just got a few things. I've got a few things that I want to say to make sure that people hear it. Because I'm hoping that there's some people who will watch this who are thinking about how to do it themselves. And there are some key points, right? You need to get a sponsor as high up in your organization as possible, right? Now, I was terrified of doing this, but I wrote to the country manager. You know, he runs a business that is, you know, certainly billions of dollars, if not tens of billions of dollars, you know, every year. He controls 4,000 people. But you know what? When I sat in front of him, turned out his brother and his sister were mad for climate. And he was the black sheep of the family because he was all about money, and he wanted a piece of the climate action. Okay. And he was also getting a message from higher up saying, you need to start thinking about this green stuff. And he wanted to get behind it. So don't be frightened to write to the board or write to the CEO, right? Whoever you need to get hold of. And if that doesn't work, you just go down one level. You need some help, right? Most businesses of a reasonable size have got someone whose job is sustainability. It might be part of their job, or it might be their job altogether. They're generally in the facilities office. But if you find that person, they will be a champion that can help you navigate the business and get to the right places and you know, see you need to see. And there's also another person, which is the welfare / health person, because there's lots of health implications. Typically they're in HR. And again, you know, they will see that it's part of their job to help you, you know, and they've got, you know, time to do that. The other thing is, if your business takes in interns, if you take in, you know, students that are doing a gap year in the middle of their degree, typically they are much more interested in working on interesting projects that they can put on their CV. They've got a lot more latitude and freedom of movement to do what they want to do. and you may well get some manpower from them. Somewhere you've got to get some budget. My Romanian pals who've done an amazing job growing their engagement from 0 to 500 people in less than a year out of a country where there's only 4,000 people working. They got some money from HR. I would have got some money from the country manager, but you need you need a bit of money to buy things. You want to get to the point where you're, giving everyone a reusable cut. It's a lot of money. So do that. Sponsor some help from somewhere and a budget, and then please remember, I found out, brutally found out that working with volunteers is very different from working with, people, normal people who would work on a work project with you. You simply can't expect them to do stuff unless they're interested in it. So you've got to make sure you know what people want to do. I built a group of about 25 people who were attending, bi-weekly or monthly calls. But if you want them to get really engaged, you've got to find out what they want to do. Are they interested in plastics? Are they interested in, rewilding the verges, or, what is it that they care about? And do some of that stuff. It may not be the right stuff, the stuff that's really going to lower CO2 generation, but you have to get engagement before you can begin to move on those other things. And again, not just knowing what your immediate group wants, but if you want to build engagement in your business, then again, you've got to do things that they're interested in. So you have to survey, and you have to survey again and again and again and again. Remember that volunteers are different, and some months a volunteer can give you 10 hours. The next month they might not be able to give you anything. So that's my that's my message. Yeah.
So Roland, you said that you presented to this huge management team.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
On climate. So basically, what did they say? Did they say they wanted to go ahead with something, or did they say go away and come back next year?
Well, so it was both better and worse than that. So basically, I got in front of the country manager. It was very lucky. He was having a meeting the week after with all of the senior leaders from the country. So about 100 middle and senior managers. And he said, I want to put you in front of those people. And in fact, we've got some breakout sessions for various subjects that we're working on. There were certain, they call them pillars. So there were 4 or 5 pillars that they were going to focus on for the next year, right? So our next year starts June the 1st, our next financial year. And he said, I'm going to make one of these pillars, green, climate. And so basically I and a few other people, from the group and some other people as well, ran some breakout sessions with managers. And we essentially, so I had about 5 or 6 managers in my room where we talked about what changes they thought they could make in their businesses in the next year that would reduce CO2 generation. And we had some absolutely fantastic ideas. And there were, I think, 5 separate breakout sessions, breakout rooms. So all of that, unfortunately, then I left, right? So we had the impact, and unfortunately, I don't get to see the conclusion. Yeah. But all of that stuff will be collated, and from it, a number of projects will be chosen. Probably, slightly different for each business unit. There'll be some that are horizontal across the whole business, and then some that are business unit specific. But we had some crazy ideas coming out, like they were saying, well, when you design, software that we're selling, let's make how much power it uses a criteria of design. Previously how much code there was and how much resource it used was a criteria.
It's a good KPI.
But Let's actually make it. Yeah, let's make it. How much CO2 does your bit of code generate? You know, it's your bit of code is going to run 28 billion times a year. Let's shave a couple of grams off each run, and away you go. You know, there were all sorts of ideas. It was really fantastic. Things I'd never thought.
Well,
of.
we
And
haven't
these are
mentioned
people-
Steve Jobs today. We've gone through everyone else. So Steve Jobs says, "Be curious," and I think "be curious" is every part of life. Status quo for me is a bit boring, so I always question whether something can be done properly, and you're a testament to that. I take my hat off to you, and I hope you have inspired others, middle management, lower management, the person that sweeps the floors, for God's sakes. Everybody can get involved with this. So when we're talking about so many different aspects, a corporate structure is just that. The MD, any person in charge, if they don't listen to the grassroots, and that's their new customer. So I recognize you for your hard work, and it comes across in spades how passionate you are about this. Have you taken it onto your new venture?
Absolutely, I will be. Well, you know, they might have something in place, in which case I'll join in. But if they haven't, I'll be starting something anew.
Roland, I've really been blown away by what's been achieved here by you and the others and your company. If you'd like to put something, if you'd like to put a short summary together of some of this and put your name to it and pop it together, send it to me so we can put it on the Facebook page. But I mean, from what I'm hearing, you know, you're a real expert in what is a very complicated area, and I hope that someone listening will really recognize you for this expertise and say, look, we need you to come on board and drive this for another organization, because you know, with 100,000 employees, you've got a massive multiplier on what you and the team is doing. And I think the first person you should be talking to is Donna Simpson and Chris Joyce at the Royal Borough, because, you know, in some ways you and your team sound to be really way ahead. Yeah.
Well, you've just given me an idea, actually. Of course, you know, she's running these workshops in which she's asking for input from, you know, various action groups around the borough, which I've attended some of them, and of course promoting the idea of, you know, green teams within the borough's businesses would absolutely be a way to do promoting it and supporting those green teams within businesses.
Yeah, and another thing, Roland, is you delivering green team. So the council give you a rubber stamp and say you're an official green team member, and send you out to work for other companies, and they pay for your work. Yeah.
Have you just invented my next job?
Why not? I have, because I mean I'm blown away by what you've already achieved within this. So Roland, thanks ever so much for joining us. Do send us a few notes. Garry, do you want to say your final few words?
Charles, I'd love to say a few words. I think that, like anything in life, we need a combination of multiple things. What we've got here is we really need a holistic approach. There are a great many things, but fossil fuel is something we need to reduce. That's obvious. And then we need to think about carbon offsetting. And then we need to think about the population. There are reducing what we can do as individuals, eating less meat, how we choose to travel. It's a whole spectrum of things, and I don't think there'll be just one answer. When we look at the world, what will it look like on Earth Day in 50 years? I got that from one of the people watching. What will Earth Day be like in 50 years? Now, here's our choice. Now, I was told this by a very wise man. He said, it's neither the worst case scenario or the best case scenario. It generally is somewhere in the middle, either side, depending on how much you want. So the very worst case scenario, there isn't an Earth in 50 years. The best case scenario, we have a smaller population that's much more efficient, that we are enjoying our wildlife. Our wildlife is coming back. The sky is good. We're not full of toxins. There's enough vegetation to feed the world. There's no more drought. There's no more pollution. And that's the best and that's the worst. And hopefully in 50 years, we'll be edging towards that. Now, that's our choice. If you've enjoyed watching this, it's really thanks to Charles. Charles was the one with the energy to put this together. He was the one that convinced me. There's a saying amongst my friends, you've been Garried, I've been Charlesed. He convinced me, and it was a good, and I'm really glad. We're at the end of the summit, and I feel very, very proud that I was any part of it. So I want to thank all the speakers that have been involved today, because you've added an element. You all had an argument from the beginning to the end. Aristotle, he said the person that wins the best argument has the best argument. So at the end of the day, everyone's right. It's just about that holistic approach and a little bit of everything. Charles, we should give you the last word, sir, because you put this together. It's your vision. I remember the first time I met you, and I was taken aback by your passion that you wanted to tell everybody, if you were living and breathing, we need to plant more trees. You've gone through a journey, and I think we should leave the final words to you, sir.
So Garry, I really like your idea, imagine the world 50 years ahead, imagine Earth Day 2070. I think that's exactly what we need to be thinking about, so that we actually make the world a different world. I mean, this is the world that our children and grandchildren are going to be inhabiting. They're going to be looking back and saying, look, on Earth Day 2020, what did you do? What did you do differently in the middle of coronavirus? And we've, with the speakers we've had today, I mean, I've just been blown away with all the insights that we've had from everybody. Just so people are aware, there are three parts to this on Facebook for technical reasons. You can look at all the bits. I'm really hoping that everyone who's presented we can link to their portion of this to make it easy for people to find. But it's been some fantastic insights. I want to thank everybody who's presented. I want to thank everybody who's been listening and has shared this, and everybody who's been part of it, because at the end of the day, we only make a difference. As one of our friends has said, look, it's been too much of the climate change talking within a bubble, within their own echo chamber. And what we need to do today, and hopefully we can achieve this with the recordings, is to point to people to the recordings and say, look, some people there said some stuff that was really, really insightful. And you guys need to listen to this in order to broaden out the education. We've got the material together now. It's going to be available to everybody. Thank you for everybody. And with those recordings, Garry, we do want people to continue to share those recordings, because that's really what makes all the difference. And Garry, okay, I got this to happen because I was inspired by what you did. Garry, this wouldn't have happened with me on my own. I mean, I can't.
I'm sure
understand I can't press the buttons to make it work. We need a Garry.
You're quite
resourceful,
to make it happen, Charles.
Garry.
You would have figured it out. You would have figured it out. And just the message is whatever lights your fire, let it be. Whether that be you protest that the world's overpopulated, or that you want to go vegan, whatever it happens to be, just feel empowered that you can make a choice. And Charles, really, thank you so much for involving me. The pleasure is all mine. It was quite something back here in the control center, ticking away. And there are other people that have been working and designing. Colleen, who designed this wonderful graphic, and she's been sharing. So your wife, she's been giving us advice from the stage, so we really appreciate. We should acknowledge her and acknowledge everybody that watched. We're around 5,000 now. If people share that could be 10 times more people. So Charles, I'm going
Garry,
to grab a bite to eat.
Your
stamina, sir. You're there.
How do we do it on screen handshake, Garry?
Or even a hug.
Fantastic. Garry,
well, I'm putting this broadcast to bed. We just to remind you, we generally do a fortnightly show on a smaller scale, 1 hour on this platform on Facebook. There is a podcast, there is a YouTube video, there is a way of buying trees if you need it.
yeah. And so yeah, if you'd like to plant some trees or do some rewilding or any of the other things that came up today, do please take a look at the website www.n0co2.org. And for our next show in a couple of weeks, I'm tempted to have a sort of feedback discussion, what came out of today, and what the theme of what people can actually do.
And we put it out there. If you want to be a guest on the show, just write to Charles, write to myself.
Absolutely.
And, we're always interested in different ideas, pushing the boundaries. 5.5 hours, not 1 inch was boring. I was at the edge of my seat over here. So thank you, everyone, and have a safe
Thanks, Garry.
safe evening.
Goodbye. Bye, Garry.
Charles